good.
All right. As we start moving towards our seats, I just want to thank you all so much for being with us this evening to celebrate Lauren's fabulous new book, Medusa Sisters. Before we move on, I want to go ahead and acknowledge that we gather as guests on the unceded traditional lands of the Duwamish people who have lived in and been caretakers of the land here since time immemorial. We thank the people of the Coast Salish tribes for their stewardship, and we strive to nurture our relationships with Indigenous people of the Northwest by joining their efforts to work for social justice and to care for this land. I also want to do a little housekeeping, just letting you know that if you are a fantasy, science fiction, speculative fiction enthusiast, we have some events coming up that might interest you. This Saturday, we have Pierce Brown, author of Red Rising, joining us, 7 p.m. It's going to be a hoot and a holler. We have Shannon McGuire, Monday, October 30th at 6 p.m. And for those of you who, like me, grew up obsessed with Aragon because it was your Lord of the Rings training wheels, we have Chris Paolini with Terry Burks, Robin Hobb, and Sean Speakman on November 14th. Please feel free to check out our calendar. We have wonderful people like these all the time, so please come on down. And without further ado, the wonderful Cherie Priest is the author of 24 books and novellas, including the horror novel The Toll, the acclaimed Gothic Maplecroft, and the award-winning Clockwork Century series, beginning with Bone Shaker. She has been nominated for the Hugo Award and the Nebula Award, and she won the Locus Award for Best Horror Novel. Her books have been translated into 9 languages in 11 countries. She lives in Seattle, Washington. The second book in her current series, Flight Risk, is out only here right now. It's actually out on August 15th, but we have it in paperback. The hardcover's already out, but we have it in paperback. So if you've been waiting, today's your day. It's happening. Lauren J.A. Baer in Long Beach. After studying English at UCLA and education at LMU, she taught middle school humanities for over a decade and survived. She's a teaching fellow at the Holocaust Center for Humanity and lives in Seattle with her husband and 3 young children. She likes crossword puzzles and being on or near the water without getting wet. And I just want to say two shout outs. First of all, if you haven't seen the write-up of Medusa Sisters in the Seattle Times, it's kind of epic. It was really circulating around the bookstore. People were like, is this her? Is she coming? And then just my personal pitch for the book. If you have ever looked at history and thought about the countless women who have been overlooked and written out of historical narratives, this is a powerful ode to those people. And I cannot wait for you to read it. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our authors this evening.
Well, hi, everybody, and thank you for coming out. Can you hear me all right? Usually I'm pretty loud. I am Cherie Priest, and I am just here to ask this amazing questions. And I'm very excited about it. So I was given Medusa Sisters about a week ago, and my entire plan was to read the first part and the last part and skim the middle, and I just got sucked into it and I've read the whole thing. And, which is seriously a huge endorsement because I've not been reading much of anything right now. It's been one of those years so far. But right, so we were given a list of questions that were kind of the same questions that she always gets all the time, I'm sure. And I was going to start from a different angle, specifically Mary Renault. Great comparison, or does it make your teeth itch?
I mean, any comparison just makes me feel like I'm in the game. Like, in Pirates of the Caribbean, where Johnny Depp comes on and they're like, "You're Jack Sparrow," and he's like, "So you've heard of me?" Like that's where I'm at this point. So I'll take it.
Okay, because that's what I told the nice lady. I was at a doctor's appointment and the receptionist follows me online. She's like, "Oh, what are you doing this week?" I'm like, "Well, I'm gonna do this thing, it's author event." She's like, "Well, what's the book like? What's it about?" And I went, "It's Mary Renault, but it's Frenchier, and give it a try." So, yes. I do believe that one of the things that she wanted to talk about was kind of the difference between what you keep and what you use as logic stack of narrative convenience when it comes to the canon of myth, because I realized that with mythology, the canon comes with air quotes, because it's got so many different versions. So why don't you talk about that?
All right. When I had the idea to tackle this story, I went first to the primary sources because that's what you do. You're looking for the information that you can then play with. And what I found was that there isn't a lot of information, and what I could find was really conflicting. It was like kind of putting together a jigsaw puzzle, but all the pieces come from a different set. And that's where I was trying to tell a story about Medusa's sisters, an alternative Medusa story. The core of Medusa's story obviously relates to Perseus. So those of you who have taken like a cursory class in mythology know that Perseus chops off Medusa's head. And he uses it as a weapon in his vengeance quest, his hero's journey against his grandfather. Well, for the sisters themselves, there's very little. I got to use my imagination to fill in a lot of stories for them. And I really wanted to think about what it would be like to be born with two sisters and to know from day one that one of you is going to die and two of you are going to live forever. And what living would be like under such extreme demands. And kind of their story goes from there. And I had a lot of fun putting in stories that I really like from Greek mythology that would plausibly fit into the Gorgon myth and still have Medusa get her head chopped off at the appropriate time.
Do you have siblings yourself?
I do. I have
What's that relationship like? Somebody who has read this book.
Yeah, I'm just trying to wait up. I love my brother very much, but I don't actually have biological sisters. But my girlfriends are so sacred to me, and so many of them are here. They are my people. I love them unconditionally. So I think I do understand what it's like to feel connected to another person who might not be similar to you, but that you love and protect against all odds.
This is the next thing here a bit. You do something really interesting with point of view, and it's one of those fiddly things where we're getting started into the story. It's like, well, am I going to tell this from first person, third person, how are we going to present this? And you went, I refuse to choose one. I'm going to go for the gold.
Yeah.
So my question would be, why did you choose the first person narrator that you did, and why did you choose the second one? And maybe explain a little bit.
Yes, so the story, Medusa does not get a perspective. This is Medusa's story as it's told by her sisters. And so because they view her differently, they define her differently as well. You have to kind of come to terms with what you think she is by taking those two perspectives into account. But in my opinion, that's what truth is. Whatever truth can be is most closely found when we take as many perspectives into account as possible. One of the narrative decisions that I was not willing to compromise on was that one would be first person and one was going to be third person. And the reason for that is I think that privilege and character interiority access and character interiority is a privilege. And just based on the personalities of these two characters, one was going to supply that and one was not. Steno is the older sister. She has older sister vibes for sure. She's the first person voice. But Euryale is more prickly. She's more closed off, and it felt more natural for her to be the third person.
Because I was going to say, anybody who kind of makes assumptions about it, people do make assumptions when you write in first person. How much is this like you? How much is this like more sibling dynamics and family else? That can be a fiddly thing. Let's see, I don't know. Is there anything particular you would like to talk about that you have been asked a million times? Like, why Medusa? Where do you get your idea?
I get why Medusa a lot. I think obviously Medusa is an icon. And even if you haven't studied Greek mythology prodigiously, you have an image of what you think Medusa is. And usually it's either a symbol of rage or some kind of seductress. And I wanted to create a Medusa that was neither of those things. There is rage and there is seduction, but those narratives almost belong to different characters in the story. And I love the reclaiming of Medusa as a female rage symbol. I love some good female rage too. But when I looked in the primary source material, I couldn't find any evidence of Medusa ever hurting anybody, except when she's disembodied. And only when she is a head and she's used as an instrument, as an object by Perseus, does she kill people. But Medusa herself doesn't. So that was something I really wanted to hold true to.
Yeah, no, I kind of wondered when I was reading if you were going to approach the, one of my professors used to joke about exhuming all the dead feminists. There's a lot of academic chatter in the last few years about, well, Medusa, it wasn't a curse, it was a gift. It was a gift and a warning to men. It was a way to punish men for the way she'd been treated. And you actually went ahead and came at that angle.
Yeah, and I felt like if this was a punishment against mortal men, then it would have been a mortal man who hurt her, but it's not. So that's why I played around with that.
Let's see. But I don't want to ask all the same questions. And you answer quickly, Dre. Stop being so concise.
When you've been a teacher for a long time, you know how to just say stuff.
Now you're a writer, you gotta ramble. Bottle rocket nonsense, remember? No, that's me, the bottle rocket nonsense, not her. Let's see. I don't know. What angle would you like to come out next? What feels good to you? Light stairs. No, I get it. Silence fills the room. Let's see. Well, here I go. I'm having one of those days, like I said. I don't know. Why don't you talk a little bit just about the things that you changed versus the things that you kept? And from what, because you mentioned in brief about, pastiching and something and stuff, and then, the cherry picking is kind of what we call it, or logic spackle or narrative convenience. I used to write a lot of alternate history, and people would be like, why did you keep this thing and why did you change this thing? Narrative convenience. There's no special reason, there's no fancy reason. But every now and again there is a reason. So do you have reasons?
Yeah, I was talking to someone that had said she really hoped that Medusa wasn't gonna die. That I was going to change the story that much and Medusa would live. And I understand this. But because there are so many few details about her in the canon, I felt like I would remain pretty true to the ones that I had. And then I took a lot of liberties throughout the story. So, I kept the family, although one of the things that's frustrating when you study these ancient materials is that none of them make sense, and you have to suspend reality times 10. I couldn't find a system where it would make sense that two immortals can have a mortal. I was doing the thing you do in 6th grade genetics with the what's his name, Mendel. Yeah, and I was trying to figure out how immortals could have mortals, and there is no system. So I had to make out a system. I had to create a mythology for that, which is why I have these babies that are born in call or without a call, and how that indicated their future mortality. So yeah, I had a lot of fun playing around with my imagination.
I had somebody asking me, speaking of, well, maybe she'll live this time. Somebody was asking me, this movie, the Record of the Demeter, or whatever, that sounds really cool. Does anybody survive? Dracula survives. That's it, just him. Let's see. Was there anything that you wanted to include that you didn't get a chance to? Was there anything that just you couldn't figure out a good way to bring it in?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that, again, this might not be common knowledge, but Medusa is the mother of Pegasus, the winged horse. And so Pegasus does show up in the book, but very briefly. And that would have been a lot of fun to write something with Pegasus maybe in the future. But yeah, that was one. But again, that's Medusa's horse kid, and I was focused. I was focused on her sister, so Pegasus had to go.
Well, you were talking about your girlfriends and how, the sibling dynamic. It seems very. I am an older sister. I have a younger sister with whom I'm not especially close, to be honest, and a younger brother who's enough younger than me that I'm practically his aunt. And the dynamics are very strange among people who grow up together and people who don't. I'm just kind of wondering what experiences of your own and your own friendships or relationships kind of inform those dynamics, because they're very, very, they're very accurate in my experience. I was feeling the big sister, just trying to keep everybody together from running off the cliff.
Yeah, I think to be a writer, first and foremost, you have to be an observer. And so I think I just pay attention and I take a lot of notes and I sit quietly and think a lot. And I really watch the people around me and how they interact. And I use that for my source material. And I think that family relationships are one of the most fascinating to explore. We've been doing it for hundreds of years and we will continue to, thousands of years, and we will continue to. Because they're timeless, and so much of mythology is also very timeless. I think that mythology, and why we keep coming back to these stories, is there's such extreme situations, right? And they're full of all the most salacious parts of being a human that we really love, like great adventure and like super hunky guys and lava. Like there's like all this stuff. But within this world, we're able to really tackle pressing social, emotional issues. Ursula Le Guin was like my favorite human ever. Really defends genre fiction and how fantasy is the oldest type of literature. And for so long, as she says, it was like relegated to the nursery. Like those aren't the smart stories. That's not literary enough. Realistic fiction is where it's at. And Ursula Le Guin argues so succinctly for how when we stretch our imagination, we actually have more options to explore the real world.
It's kind of like the proto-Marvel superheroes, basically. But the more you talk about it, the more it made me think about, it's like comic books. I mean, the continuity comes with air quotes. It's just going to by necessity because it's been going on for so long and we've told from so many different directions. It was Bettelheim or somebody talking about how in fables we actually get to tell the truth. It's very Oscar Wilde. People are lying to you, but you get them to ask, they'll tell you the truth. And I just thought you did a really wonderful job of seeing to it that these are very human characters, but they're also not human. And when we create the gods, regardless of your religious structure, everything we know about any higher power comes filtered to us through other people. You get these exaggerated human personalities with almost unlimited power, and look at the way they behave, and look how they treat each other, which was just kind of the fascinating thing to me. The hierarchies that are formed from gods, even they did say
Well, and that's definitely something I wanted to approach in the book is that, absolute power corrupts absolutely, whether it's a male or a female with the power. And so in Medusa's sisters, we see both gods and goddesses acting yeah, exactly.
What kind of stuff, you were talking about primary sources, what fiction do you read that helps inform some of this?
I read everything. My children are here, but I'm a promiscuous reader. I honestly get something from every genre, from every type of storytelling. I find value in all of it. I actually stopped reading a lot of retellings when I was writing this because I didn't want imposter syndrome and feeling like, oh, I'll never do as well as, this person. And also I wanted to keep the mechanism clear, So I read everything else in the meantime.
Yeah, and like whatever you consume is going to inform kind of like season material. No, I totally get it. I was working on some vampire stuff a while back. I'm like, I gotta quit reading this vampire stuff. It sounds just like all the rest of these things.
Yeah.
You don't want to do that. Was there anything in particular that you really wanted to, that you had to cut at the last minute? Or editing can be such a weird process with the rewrites, and sometimes you gotta fight for your darlings, and sometimes you gotta let them go. Any characters you would have liked to include or try to, and it just got left on the cutting room floor?
No, I'm a pretty succinct writer, and I have a lot of former students here, and they'll know that I was all about brevity and clarity. Like
It's very frustrating for an interviewer.
But yeah, brevity and clarity. Like you need to write. I don't know. Maybe I read too much Hemingway in my formative years, but So yeah, if anything, I think my editor was like, you can draw these moments out a little bit more.
Please, don't listen. And you went here, it's 5 years past. No.
Yeah. No, I don't have that like Dickens quality of like spending 8 pages describing the
Are
upholstery.
you having paid by the letters?
Yeah, I know.
We don't get that very often. Yeah, but, I don't know, the conversation keeps coming around about how, train of thought completely around. Oh, yes, genre fiction not being real fiction and whatnot, and I got my master's degree in rhetoric, and I took one creative writing workshop where I was told absolutely no genre fiction, that is garbage and trash, you'll never make any money doing that, you'll never get paid doing that, not in my workshop. I know that you also spent some time in education. Did you have any experiences like that? Or no? Were you just kind of encouraged from the ground up?
I think that I didn't realize how much of the misogyny around the English major I had ingested until much later. I was an English major and I took it so seriously and I loved being an English major. And it was just always assumed I would be a teacher. That's what everyone told me. Like, oh, so you're going to be a teacher. What grade are you going to teach?
Right.
And I was never
Write
planning.
children's books.
Yeah, I was never planning to be a teacher. And I noticed that all of my, male peers were asked if they were going to be writers. And so I just graduated as an English major because I loved it, and I did become a teacher. And I loved being a teacher. And I realized that not only had I inherited this really misogynistic thought, but also that it was so wrong, because being a teacher was some of the most important work I've ever done. Definitely some of the hardest work I've ever done. And I think that when you are around kids all the time, and you are constantly being asked questions, you become a better person.
It forces you to clarify your own thoughts when you ask things like that. Right. That's terrific. Like, I got encouragement, don't get me wrong, just not from any of our writing teachers.
Yeah, and the question, like, who are the Gorgons, that was like a very 6th grade question that was clearly in my head, lodged in there somewhere. And, I was on maternity leave. I told the story a lot of times, but I was on maternity leave with my daughter, and the question came back to me, who are the Gorgons? And, it provoked this Wikipedia search, and I found the quote that kind of changed my life, this quote about the Gorgons being appendages, and then me knowing immediately I needed to change that.
Was this, not quite sure how to ask this question. Was this your first effort to tell a story about the Gorgons, or basically what were you working on before this happened, and how did this kind of evolve, or did it just kind of fall out of Zeus's forehead?
Yeah, there is that element of like the muses coming. Yeah. I really think it came from sleep deprivation.
That's great ideas. 3 in the morning when we sleep.
Yeah.
Well, you talked about being on maternity leave too. There's one of the kind of recurring themes it looked like to me. I'm sorry, I know I'm a little hoarse. That's why I'm like leaning in here like this. That kind of kept jumping out at me. It was not just like the cycle of birth and death, body of mortality, but also the things that you and the things that you can't get rid of, and the things that you want you can't have. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and I think there's a huge part of the book about forgiveness and vengeance and kind of where they overlap. And I think, to me, family is when you forgive each other without asking for it. Like you just love each other enough that it happens. And definitely, like with Riley, she is not the type that she does not ask for forgiveness. She is who she is, kind of unapologetically. And her sister finds a way to love her regardless.
Yeah, there's a scene toward the, it's not spoiler, I wouldn't say anything, where they've been fighting for a while, and then she runs and wakes her up in the middle of the night, and they just talk like everything's fine, which is exactly what sisters do, whether or not they get along. And that was something that really kind of leaked out of me. Like this is exactly how that works, where I hate you, go away, die. Hey, you want to go get fries?
Yeah. And when the moment comes, the threshold moment, you're going to be there for each other. I hope.
Yeah,
You know.
really. And I think for the most part, my sister and I have done that too, especially as our parents are aging and we're starting to have some fun with that. One of the other things that kind of popped out at me, I'm an English major myself, so this is what we do, was the idea of consent and how consent is impacted by both fate and the things we can't choose and can't do anything without, and by these powerful beings who act without any kind of checks or balances. Let's have a conversation about that.
Yes.
So there's a lot of lack of consent and a lot of, negotiation, I should say.
Yeah, I think the gods in this book are not human characters, right? They're not raised with any kind of human morality or human idea of right or wrong. There isn't a justice aspect to that, and that's not to condone their actions, but it's just they live in kind of this amoral,
They're solipsistic, narcissists.
and so because of that, yeah, there is nothing that they can act with impunity, right? But my girls find vengeance in little ways throughout the book because there needed to be some catharsis too. There needed to be this opportunity for them to get some power or some agency back, and ultimately, by them having a voice, by them having narration, that's the ultimate, taking power back. That's the ultimate transfer of authority. The ultimate act of subversion is to take power away from the dominant storyteller and give it to the underrepresented voice.
That's always, something that I enjoy doing as well. I was going somewhere with that, and now I've lost it. I'm sorry, I'm very tired. What was I headed for that? Train of thought is completely derailed. When you're talking about tragedy in particular, that was what was pinging off of me in catharsis. What are some of your favorite tragedies that helped inform this? Oh, not this. You didn't write this. This is something I found.
No, yeah, that's just a notebook. Tragedies.
Yeah, and catharsis. I took classics myself, and it was honestly just not always for me. It's like, yes, terrible things happen, and then more terrible things happen, and then subsequent terrible things happen, and then a final terrible thing happens, and that's kind of it. And I never really, I don't get catharsis, but I love horror. Same kind of thing.
The book I'm working on right now is called Mother of Rome, and it's the Rhea Silvia story. She's the mother of Romulus and Remus, who go on to, form the city of Rome. So it's Rome before it's Rome when it's just honestly a bunch of very loosely connected Latin tribes. And this book, more than Medusa's Sisters, feels like a Shakespearean tragedy in that there's the scene where there's just dead bodies everywhere. So I guess when I think of tragedy, I think of Hamlet or Macbeth, the scene where everyone's drinking poison and getting stabbed.
That's very cathartic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that what you're saying about somebody, the person who gets the last word is the person that everybody remembers pretty much, but that's not quite the case with mythology because so many people have last words on it. It's said and done. So, is this the first one you've ever drafted and written, or have you written? Do you have a few trunk novels? That's what we call them because you don't sell any from the trunk.
I do. I have a drawer novel that will never come out again. But I learned a lot from it. And another thing, if anyone here is thinking about writing, I think a really great thing is to take your manuscript and put it in the proving drawer. On the baking show, and you put it in that drawer, and then it rises and it changes, and when you go back, it's yummier and better. And that's a really good step in writing, is giving yourself a pause and giving yourself a little bit more time.
I completely agree, and I come at it from a totally other angle of letting it cool off.
Yeah.
Same principle though. The more distance you can put between yourself and your draft, the better your second draft is going to be because you've forgotten all the stupid stuff you did, and now you're going to catch it. So would you like to talk a little bit about your process in general?
Sure, and also, I would say that drafts are also, they're very fragile, and you need to treat them very carefully and with a lot of love, and be kind to yourself when you're doing that. Even when I was a teacher, I would watch kids working on their drafts, and they'd get to like word 5 and just stop because they couldn't come up with the best 5th word, you know? And it's like, just keep going, get everything out that you can go back and fix it. And that's definitely how I write. I also write longhand. Yeah, like very old soul. But I like writing longhand. One, because my kids are always around, and then I'm not on the computer as much. And then also, it has a built-in pause. Like there's time to think about what the next word's going to be and really choose it more thoughtfully.
I just longhand word. Yes. One of my only material skills is typing. I'm a very fast typist.
Yeah.
I can type so much faster than I can write my hand. That said, I do often just have like a legal pad. And I don't, there's plotters and pantsers. There's people that gardeners and architects when it comes to writing. People who kind of just go by the seat of their pants, and people who have like dossiers. I did a panel with a woman once who had, and she proved it, 4 3-ring binders on the background history and everything of this third world fantasy, but which I mean, it's not a real place in the world to be completely without fantasy setting. Where do you fall in that spectrum?
I think if you're there with the 4 binders, then I think you love research more than you love writing.
Just write the book.
No, and then you're doing it because you love the research part, or maybe you're using the research part as an escape from having to sit down and write it. And so you need to hold yourself accountable and like cut it off.
She's fairly successful, so
yeah,
it works for her. I don't know.
But a new friend of mine is Genevieve Gornichek, and she was talking about how when she researched Vikings, she found all this information on like door hinges that ancient Vikings would have had, and wrote like 3 pages about door hinges in one of her latest books, and then realized this is so boring. I need to take something. No one is going to care. But it hurt because she spent a lot of time researching that.
Gotta kill your darlings.
Yes.
I know there's a running joke. Shoot, I forget. There was an article some years back where there was like the fallacies of writing, and one of them was the hyper over researched historical novel. And we know them when we see them. We do.
Yes.
We do. And very often there's like, you're reading along and you hit the scene, you're like, this is what this writer would, this is the thing that this writer was writing for this whole time. I felt like this whole book was just sort of what you were writing for this whole time. It really comes out very, very complete and very crunchy. I tried, words for describing other people's prose or your own prose are tricky because you're kind of coming at it from these oddball angles. And anyway. Let's see, I was checking the time. Do we have any questions from the audience? Because I bet we do. Oh, you're fastest in the back with the black.
Teaching made you a better writer, and wondering how writing made you a better teacher.
The question was, did teaching make you a better writer or did writing make you a better teacher?
That's such a good question, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yes, teaching absolutely made me a better writer for one reason primarily, and it is because it made me a more compassionate person. I think that when you are in a classroom, you learn to love on a different, I'm maybe not a different level, but you just learn to love very wholeheartedly and unconditionally, and you start to understand different people and where they come from. You know, there's exposure to different families, different childhoods. So yes, absolutely, it made me a better writer. But then since I've written Medusa Sisters, I haven't been teaching, so I'm not sure. But I do think, I think I would be a better teacher now. I think I have definitely better advice about writing. You know.
Do you plan to go back to teaching at any point?
Actually, Darcy, my dear friend Darcy convinced me to do one day a week. Oh, three days. But just now. Yeah. Just teach one class a week for 7th and 8th graders, and I'm teaching writing, so I'm like, I'm ready to go.
But a lot of writing careers end up like that, where you end up writing all kinds of random oddball stuff. Have you written anything other than books? articles, reviews?
No, I have written one short story.
They heard it?
Short stories are so hard.
Oh, they're awful.
They're really hard and I have so much respect for them. And then I did write poetry in this book, and it's
I
because
was gonna ask you about that. I'd like to.
yeah, and it's because of my friend Nancy, because I was drinking champagne with her and complaining that it was gonna cost way too much money to use all of Anne Carson's poetry translations, which are so good, at the beginning of each chapter. And she looks at me and goes, "You're a writer, write your own poems." So I did. Wrote all these poems thanks to Nancy. You know, sometimes you need a little tough love.
I saw that you had an audiobook, and I was wondering about your choice, if you had how involved you were in that process, your choice for narrator, what she brought to the story.
Okay, I have two narrators because I have one for Steno and one for Riley, and we're like a sisterhood now. I love them so much. And it was really great having them alternate voices. And then I got to record the author's note and the acknowledgements, which is really cool. And my kids know I practiced for like 6 hours because all of the ancient Greek names are really hard to pronounce.
I have been avoiding saying them. I'm just gonna screw it up.
Yeah.
I was at a funeral in Florida and my cousin was talking about a video game she won, Hades, and I'm like, please, I have earned every trophy in Hades. I have 100% on the PlayStation. And I said something about Persephone and she gets real quiet. She's like, oh, is that how you say that? And this is a 30-year-old nurse who has no idea. And I'm like, well, I'm just not gonna work with those consonants.
Well, and this is another thing I said to my students when I was teaching, back in the good old days, is that never make fun of someone for mispronouncing a word because it means they learned it from reading. So,
Quite sure. Yes, you.
There's a certain complexity to being a woman today, and you, I think, beautifully illustrate that in this novel. So I'd like to know kind of what was your biggest learning in creating this story and in the process of being a woman in work?
whew. There are, this, obviously the book is about sisters. It's about finding your individuality and loving your family at the same time. And that also means your children or your partner. And what I think, by loving other people, I think these characters learn to love themselves. And I think that's true for myself as well. When I can love like all of you here, you know, I feel like a happier, better person, that's for sure.
Yes, ma'am.
I read, of course, the wonderful review in the Sunday paper. And I found myself, and of course I haven't read the book, but I found myself reflecting on the myth of Inanna
All right.
and those sisters.
The one?
The myth of Inanna, which is the
And
oldest
Inanna,
extant myth we have, is from Babylonia. And how she chooses to descend to save her younger sister.
There's a really great article about Barbies in Inanna, right? Yeah, right. So Inanna, if you're not familiar, so the very first author who ever put their name on anything in the history of writing, as far as we know, there was a woman named Hawana who wrote down the myth about the goddess Inanna, who descends to the underworld and just to check it out, basically. And then she comes back and finds that her husband has, or her partner, at any rate, has taken over and really just done a number on the place. So if you've seen Barbie, you understand why these comparisons are being made. And but we're talking about, you know, these women as Inanna in these various incarnations.
I don't know if you've seen it,
No, I haven't.
but I do the Titan Books in the UK is releasing it. It's just called Inanna,
Okay.
but I haven't read it yet. So.
I don't know if you've seen Diane Wilkstein's book on Inanna, which has been out for about 30 years. And that was really my introduction.
And this
That's
is the
amazing.
problem, is whenever I talk to other people who like to read, is my book list just gets longer and
I
longer.
literally am
Me
about to
too.
throw one.
I have quite a list.
There's a wonderful book from a few years back by Hal Duncan called Vellum. And he takes Matthew Shepard, the boy, the gay boy who was killed and tied to the fence and shot, as Saint Sebastian, as this, and like all these different incarnations, and tells this really interesting modern myth where the goddess Inanna comes down to address these things.
She would not mess with.
Not to be fiddled with, because she was sorry, there was a hand over there. Yes.
Yeah, I was curious if and when you think you'll start reading retellings again, because just earlier this year, Stone Blind
Yes.
came out, and I'm curious about how you would think about that book is kind of a partner to yours.
Totally, and I have so much respect for Natalie Haynes. She's incredible. But for my own personal well-being, I couldn't read anything else, any other Greek without Greek retellings. I maybe need a couple more months because I'm finishing this ancient Rome one right now, and then there's a lot on my list. Actually, I want to read Clytemnestra too. Yeah.
Are you familiar with Maria Joanna Ludwig? Ooh, she's lots of fun. She did her own translation of Beowulf. It's making rounds and it's getting an awful lot of. She's brilliant and hysterical and fun, and if you ever get a chance to listen to her, you should absolutely do that. But she decided she was going to do a modern interpretation of Beowulf that's being taught all over the place. And there's been all this conversation about how you translate the beginning of Beowulf, because it's like, what? It's like, well, what does this word mean?
Yeah.
And she goes, I say it means bro, and goes from there. And she also comes in a lot of the feminist angles, like we're at the end. No, she also did Odysseus and a few others, but she's a classical academic in that same vein. I think
Yeah.
you two would get on like a house on fire.
Well, and John Gardner did Grendel, I think in the
Yes.
70s, and that one's really
Grendel's come to a nasty end, so I love that book. Yeah, we've read all the same stuff apparently. Anyway, way in the back there.
So I know you said you haven't read retelling in a while just for your own mental health, and not to include all of that stuff in your own writing, but do you have any favorites from before you stopped reading them? Do you have any favorite books, any favorite authors?
Oh, I
Might
sure
just
do.
need to be re-revelation based on what you said so far, but.
Yeah, I read both of her books. They're phenomenal if you like Norse mythology. I love Ahab's Wife, which Rita's Moby Dick. That one's so good. I love March, which is Little Women, but from Mr. March, who's gone for all of the book. The Snow Child. I did. Oh, Mists of Avalon, even though I think Marion Zimmer Bradley's pretty problematic as a person, but Mists of Avalon was,
So were the endings, and I devoured those movies.
interesting books back in the day.
Anyone else? I saw another hand or two pop. What do you have? You keep talking about your big TBR class. Oh wait, sorry, in the back there, yes.
I really popped up right after.
Yeah, it's okay.
But just out of this super curiosity, I mean, I know you're working on your next book right now, but are there any stories that maybe you haven't started yet, or people that you're like, it'd be awesome if I could write about this, or something that I'm really interested in someone else will write about is this.
I love Greek and Rome, but I'm ready to step away. We'll see what my team says. But yeah, I have a lot of ideas of other ancient civilizations I'd like to tackle in those stories. Yeah.
Maria did one about Cleopatra. It's pretty great.
Oh, yeah.
I tell her that was an interesting.
And there's a new one about Scheherazade too. And I mean, she's like the OG storyteller, like total daddy. Yeah. I caught myself. I was going to say a not nice word, but I couldn't.
I was an army brat, and I could swear before I could swim, and it's hurting me right now. And I had kindergartners for several years. I think I still have that habit. But yes.
Do you have any tips for having young people, elementary students, high school students, passionate about writing?
Keep it as open as possible. Like don't mark them down for spelling. Let them write about what they want to write about. Just encourage them to keep going. Kind of like I was saying, like, to be perfect. Just write something. Something that something I think about a lot, like what it means to be a writer, because I really struggle to say that I'm a writer as a profession, but it really just means that you keep going. And so I think these kids can be writers too, as long as they just keep at it.
There's a kind of general expression, here's a many forms in the industry. If you can fix a broken page, you can't fix a blank one. Just throw it down there. You don't need, dude, I actually, in all of my manuscripts, I put in, when I'm like brackets and 3 sets of colons that I can run a keyword search for later. And I hate past Cherie every time she's done that, because it's always something like, insert something interesting here. Or, I don't know, figure out what this guy's name is later, kind of thing. Like, it's okay, just finish it. And everything you finish levels you up, one way or another. But like, to add to that, I would also say let them read whatever they want. I've seen an awful lot of kids get turned off from reading because they only are given classroom stuff. They're only given the classics. And it's boring. Like, I had to read Catcher in the Rye in high school in 1991, and kids are still reading. I thought it was boring and out of date and meaningless then. Like, what do kids now think reads stuff? Let them read comic books. There's a human impulse to imitate the things that we like, the things that we enjoy and appreciate. Let them find out what they appreciate. And I know a bunch of people who work in comics now, so it's easy for me to have that opinion that I've borrowed from others. But it really does help. Just let them read, let them draw.
I did hear someone say the other day that mythology is like the original fan fiction.
Yeah.
And that's like pretty right on.
Yeah. No, it's nice. It kind of makes everybody their own way into a universe and participating in it. My first fan fiction, I started when I was like 8 or 9 years old, and it was G.I. Joe. Yeah, I'm serious. That was like the first stuff I ever wrote was fan fiction about Duke and Lady J. I'll have them to know. I also wrote fanfic about My Little Ponies. I wrote fanfic about the Beauty and the Beast TV show. Come on, Roman, work with me here. Who I loved him. Still got a little bit of crush on him. But yeah, not everything has to be ready for publication. Sometimes you're just talking. And like, I remember I was doing this workshop for middle schoolers actually, and they would say very dry things like, and this person committed suicide. Well, that's very tragic. You want to tell me how that happened? Just talk to me. Well, he did this and this and this, and then he walked into the ocean. That's what you write down. Tell me your story. Don't try to present me a version of the story that you think I will find palatable. Sorry, Layla. I think Duke was first, and then back row. Yes.
Lauren, what was the most special or joyful part of getting your book to here? And what are you looking forward to most as your book itself?
I mean, I have cried so much in the past 2 years, and especially the last 2 days, I've just been crying. I saw my lashes are gonna fall off. I think sharing it with, when I got my agent, and I told my
agent too.
Yeah, I love my agent, and when I told my husband, I think that was.
When they gave you your baby?
No, I mean, I don't think I ever cried when they handed me my baby. I was hungry and tired. I love my baby. Oh.
Now your children know that you didn't cry.
No, I was really hungry. No, I didn't cry when I opened the box either. I think, honestly, it was that moment of like telling my husband that I got an agent. And he was just so supportive and like, it was really special.
Okay, now in the back, yes.
So if your version of recording stories
And we all want to be in a premiere with you.
Okay. Maybe one day I'll release my Pinterest board. That's the whole movie. But for Medusa, I don't know why she is Cuban. She is not Greek, but I've always imagined her looking like Ana de Almas. Is that her last name? That's what she was in my head.
I can see that conventionally attractive, but also kind of baby face.
Yeah, kind of big.
Any other casting you'd like to? What about the sisters? Yeah. Who did you have in mind for them? What do they look like?
I don't know that actress's names. I would have to, like, honestly, I would have to go back to my Pinterest board.
So they'll give you
You should do it, like supplementary content. I've seen her website, it's great.
Oh, I talked to someone the other day, and he was like, the whole time they read it, I just saw Jason Momoa is beside me, and I did not imagine that.
No, I didn't either.
He was like, and we see her beside Joe's up, he's just like bare chested, and he's got like, yeah, and like tons of weapons. But I mean, if that doesn't,
I didn't see this on it either, but I got into it.
yeah.
I didn't see Hugh Jackman's one either, but you know. Where's the short-haired Canadian I ordered? This is not. Anybody else? Because I think we're running a little low. Yeah, we're down to 6:53. So as fast as she answers questions, there's time for like 4 more.
What is something during your whole process doing this that like you thought you like at one point you're like, I don't know if I can do this. And then like what was and then whatever was in you got you through that.
Warning, but Medusa's story and the curse centers around an act of, sexual violence and violation. And I knew I needed to write that. I was very intentional about how I wrote it and the perspective that I wrote it from. But it was extremely difficult to write, and I needed to take a couple days afterwards to take a break from it. And even revising it, it was really difficult. But like I said, I am an observer. I am a woman, and so much of that scene is real.
Well, so many of us know someone to whom that has happened.
Yeah. Sorry, that was not like a very cheerful answer. But then there were other scenes where there's a baby that shows up at one point in the book, and I just had my baby, so like 100% that baby is Shay. So there were those moments.
All right, white shirt and then black shirt. She's a little bit faster, I think.
You write from a lot of different perspectives in this book, and one of the stories in the book, which is a plot line, is a gay love story. So can we talk about that a little bit? What brought you to that, and why the choice of not telling in a first person perspective?
Yeah, because I don't want to give too much away, spoiler-wise. But yeah, there is a gay love story in the book, and I wanted to be authentic about what real life looks like, and I also wanted to be authentic to what my perspective is as a, happily married straight woman. So I wanted to include these stories, but still in a way that was not me presenting that. I never wanted to pretend that was my own voice, because that was. Does that make sense?
I'm curious if you would have any music to share related to the book. So if you listened to something, or if there's like some song that you think is like the vibes of this book, or your favorite parts of the book.
I have 3 children. Like, all I listen to is the Mamma Mia soundtrack, the Spidey soundtrack, Disney Junior. And like every now and then, if I've had some drinks, like some 90s Long Beach music. So like, I don't think there's a very good soundtrack.
Or the best soundtrack.
Yeah,
the best. I was riding around with a fairly high-powered editor at one point. She had kids in the back seat. Song comes on, and it's birds do it, bees do it, and I'm like, what the hell are we listening to? And he goes, let's do it, let's go to the body. Okay, got it. That's where we are. All right. She's like, yeah, I know. Just like started. Let's see. We got 3 minutes left. Anybody? Thoughts, comments, complaints? Yes.
Is there any part of like the book that kind of bled into your life and that you've noticed like after writing this book, I say this word a lot more, or I think about these things more, or like part of the characters kind of merged into you a little bit?
These are book club level questions.
Like, I was determined not to ask you any of the ones on the list.
No, that. Yes. Gosh. I don't know so much if it's the themes of the stories that I think about all the time, but definitely now that I've crafted a book, when I look at other books, I dissect them in completely different ways. You know, and I always wonder about the choice of narration or why you chose to start the story where you did. Beginnings and endings are so important. So yeah, I think I look at books as in general different.
Yes.
When you were writing the book, I know it was a very like precious process. Do you like start from beginning to end, or do you just like write and then figure out like, okay, now I'm going to start it this way, or are you writing and then you figure out the ending, or do you know it from start to finish before you?
Yeah, you hop around.
I did. I'm pretty organized. I wrote it pretty much from beginning to end, but sometimes I would skip chapters just based on what I was in the mood to write. That's another thing for kids. If you want to write the ending, like whatever it is you want to write in that moment to get you going, go for it. But then there were two characters who did not exist originally in the story, and like I don't know where your place is. Like for some people, it's when you're driving the car. For me, it's like in the shower. I just have these visions of other people. I think that's what I had these ideas to put these characters. They came fully formed to me in the shower.
So they're not like inspired by anyone particular.
No. Although there's a lot of, again, this book definitely it's feminist, it's Barbie, and it is a critique on power, but there are some good guys in this book too, because I know a lot of good guys, and I wanted to make sure that they were included too, because that's authentic and that's also real life.
I tend to find that I borrow bits and pieces of people. You know, after my first book, Rookie Mistake, I did a caricature that was so clear. His ex-girlfriend called me up and was like, you may as well just put his address and phone number. Everybody's gonna know that's Jody. So now just bits and pieces of people, kind of remix encounters. I'm surprised Dwayne has not flagged us down yet. Usually he lurks in the back. There's Milo. All right, I was gonna say because like I'm Princess Punctual over here. It's on the jam. So it's right at 7. Milo, what would you like to do? Retreat? Have a retreat for signing of the exciting things, or?
Indeed. So we have books behind you as well as at the register. I'm going to be keeping you up there as time to there. We do ask for folks to purchase books for a time, and you can encourage that.
All right, form a line for this lovely. Oh, and there are.